Well, good morning. My name is Zack Wamp. I had the privilege of being a United States Congressman for 16 years, and in 2009, I closed the debate on the House floor for the America Competes Act, which made STEM education part of the Primary and Secondary Education Act in our country, officially kind of recognizing STEM careers as part of our education system. Now, since then, a lot of things have happened. A couple $2 billion have been spent on STEM education. Computer science has emerged as the main thrust, really, of the STEM future. We can go through a lot of data points today that support that, but this is really an outstanding 1-hour webinar with some of the best experts in the country to catch you up, and 300 or 400 or 500 STEM and computer science activists and professionals from around the country. So we want to welcome you all wherever you are. I guess it's morning everywhere in this country because I'm Eastern time and it's morning here. So good morning to each of you. Let me kind of go through the logistics here. We have the ability to submit questions using the chat box. We'll also have time for questions at the end of the presentation, we hope. Be sure to follow along with the conversation on social media using #CS Strategies ! A recording of this webinar will be available afterwards. The link will be emailed to registered attendees and will be in the STEM Daily newsletter. This morning, I'm going to open us up, and then we're going to go to Ruth Farmer, Computer Science for All, Dr. Kathleen Earhart, the Deputy Commissioner of Education in the state of Tennessee, Balaji Ganapathy, who is the Tata consulting expert here on all things computer science, and then wrap up with Commissioner Johnny Key, the Commissioner of Education in the state of Arkansas, and then hopefully your involvement and participation. A couple of data points here that we need to focus on this morning as we begin. Before I introduce Ruth, there are almost 10 times more U.S. computing jobs open right now than there were students who graduated with computer science degrees in 2015. A report on science, technology, engineering, and math from Georgetown University Center on Education and the Workforce forecasts that 51% of STEM occupations will be computer occupations by 2018. The median pay now for computer and information research scientists is about $112,000 a year, or $54 per hour. There are a lot of job openings. Our workforce and our education system have not synced up well enough to have those careers ready for our students yet, but that's what this is all about, so thanks for joining us. To tee us off, the Chief Evangelist with Computer Science for All, Ruth Farmer. Ruth, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Really nice to be here. So if we could start with my slides, I wanted to share with you all a little bit about what Computer Science for All is and is about. Can I have a slide? Right.
Your slides are up.
Oh, they are. Okay, great. I don't see them. Computer Science for All is a bold, distributed, community-based initiative that is really literally done by hundreds and hundreds of different organizations across the U.S. to get computer science into all of our schools and available for all of our students out of school. And this is a big, huge job that is being done by many, many people, many of the state organizations. And it's really been about 10 years in the making. We've had some huge wins recently. In September of last year, we launched a new AP Computer Science Principles High School course in 2,500 classrooms. And this May, 51,000 students took that AP exam for the first time, effectively doubling the total number of students taking AP in the nation. So that was a huge win, and lots of researchers and curriculum developers have been working on that since 2007 and 2008. You might have heard the news recently that Girl Scouts has added computing, robotics, and cybersecurity badges, which I'm super excited about because that means computer science is available to every girl in every zip code forever. And you know, Girl Scouts is part of the fabric of American life, so using those big networks is a really effective way to get this done. I'm looking forward to Boy Scouts and the Y and Campfire and the other organizations stepping up to that opportunity. So the big thing I want to stress about computer science and why it's so important is, if we could go to the next slide, it's not that computer science is more important than other STEM. Important, it's that computer science is missing. And I think that's what people don't understand, or they perceive that computer science is in our schools because their kids use computers. And using computers is not the same as learning computing and computation. And so I think it's really important to just kind of open up this idea of unpacking STEM and realize that the piece of it in the education that's been missing is the computing and the technology and the engineering. And so that's what we're looking to add in. Go to the next slide. I think this has already been said by Zack, but there's a tremendous amount of jobs available in computing, and our graduation rates just do not match up. And so if we're looking at a future in which we continue to compete globally as a country, filling these jobs with people from this country is really critical, because many of the tech employers are global companies, and if they can't find the workers here, they're going to have to take those jobs to other locations in other countries. So it's really important for our current economic situation to have people in computing. But it's also really important for the future. And so if we can go to the next slide, I think thinking long term, what does it look like for the United States to have a population of people who are computationally literate? That I know that the doctors of the future are going to rely on technology in ways that we can't even imagine right now. And so they need to grow up understanding what computation is, in the same way that the people who build our businesses and build our schools, everyone needs to have a foundational understanding of computation. Computing is going to revolutionize virtually every industry we have. Healthcare, transportation, it's already happening. I believe the first fully automated delivery took place a few months ago from Kansas City to Denver. So we've already got robotic trucking. We're all on the verge of driverless cars. All of that is going to move our jobs into more of a skill-based workforce, especially in manufacturing. So foundational computer science for all students means they are ready to learn the skills they need to go into those very technical and skill-based jobs. And then finally, I think it's really, really important. All rely on software nearly all day, every day, that we as citizens understand the implications of computing and the power of it, and the power that computing has to amplify the impact of an action. And so foundational computational thinking for all students is part of making that happen. So to my final slide, I would just say that computing and computer science for all is really a community initiative. I see this as our modern day space race. Like, if we come together as a country and we collaborate as people to get this done, it's gonna set up not only the students of today, but the students of 10 years from now to revolutionize the world. And this is happening all over the world. There's a group of countries known as the D5, the Digital Five, and we, the United States, do not qualify to be in the Digital Five. Estonia does, the UK does, and Israel does, but we don't. So it's time for us to really come together from both sides of the table to get this content to our students. And I think with urgency, but at the same time making sure that it is extremely rigorous, that we are inclusive of all students of all types and walks of life, and that we build a system that's sustainable going into the future. Thanks.
Ruth, excellent presentation. Thank you so much for your leadership. I can see why they call you the chief evangelist, because I think people are coming to the altar as I speak. Our next presenter comes from the great state of Tennessee. I'm very proud of what we're doing in Tennessee. Dr. Kathleen Earhart was a superintendent of the year. She's been in the classroom. She has run a system. She is our deputy commissioner of education. Tennessee is a leader on several fronts in education today. The first state in the country that other states are now following that guarantees 2 years of college free to our students and our citizens, which is Tennessee Promise. Drive to 55, which is clearly going to increase the number of certificates and degrees in our state as well. And then a huge STEM focus using the platform of Learning Blade all across the state in middle schools. And Dr. Earhart is a real leader. I love it when engineers enter the workforce in the education space. I saw the data point that you're 4 times more likely to be a CEO today of a Fortune 500 company if you're an engineer than if you have an MBA. So straight out of Tennessee Tech, Tennessee's finest, Dr. Kathleen Earhart, give us a little update on what's happening in Tennessee and in the workforce and education connection that we're leading on here. Dr. Earhart.
Sure. Thank you, Zach. It's really great to join this conversation this morning. As was mentioned, I came from a district to the state in 2010 and actually began my career in education as a science teacher. So I certainly feel the link and the need for these kind of programs in Tennessee. If you could advance to the first slide. The first initiative I want to talk about is the Drive to 55 initiative, and this was brought about in 2010 under the Complete College Tennessee Act, and this was about the same time that Tennessee was awarded Race to the Top, and this was our new governor's attainment goal of hitting 55% of working age adults to have a post-secondary credential by 2025. And as you can see by this slide, we are well off of that number. We're sitting right now at about 33.8% of our adults only having an associate's degree or higher, and about 5% of those have some sort of secondary certificate and not a college degree. So it is a challenge for Tennessee. We have many job opportunities, but not the employees that are ready to fill them. So it's not only a challenge for our adults, it's a challenge for our school systems. So going to the next slide, talking about Tennessee Promise. Tennessee Promise is something that was initiated 3 years ago in Tennessee. We already had free college through lottery scholarship, which required students to hit a certain GPA. What Tennessee promises is it takes it a little bit further, stating that any student that wants to go to college to earn a 2-year degree or a Applied Technology Center certificate can do that at no cost. And this was initiated in 2015, and we had about 16,300 students participate that first year. And the cost associated is listed on this slide. That jumped up the following year to about 16,800 students, and next year we're estimating about 17,000 students participating. We do know, in keeping track of the data, that about 80% of our high school students apply for participation in this, and then about 30% of those go on and participate. And there's different factors in that. Some of our students go on to 4-year institutions, some have other opportunities and don't need to have access to the Tennessee Promise. But the good news is it's raised our participation rate in college by 10% in Tennessee in 2 years. So if you would go to the next slide, and looking at some of the outcomes. One of the biggest outcome is now Tennessee has led the nation 2 years in a row in the FAFSA filing rate. We encourage and actually have filing days in all of our high schools, so students all participate in this application for federal assistance. Our going rates, as I've mentioned, have gone up about 10% in the first year, and our retention rates at our community colleges are about 10% higher for those enrolled in Tennessee Promise as compared to those who just enter independently. And a part of that is the mentoring system that goes along with this process. I serve as a mentor to a number of students in Tennessee, as do about 10,000 other adults serving as mentors to help students in their first year of college, their last year of high school. So to the next slide. So going to a little bit about Learning Blade and its usage in Tennessee, I had the great opportunity to first look at Learning Blade before it was actually implemented, and was so excited to see this opportunity to share STEM careers with students, especially younger students before they enter high school, because they have to start making plans for what courses they'll take in high school if they are to pursue a STEM career after high school. So in the first year in Learning Blade, we had about 656 schools participate. Second year report, 656 schools, up from about 100 the year before. And most of those are middle schools, although we allow high schools and elementary to access this program. We have about 74,000 students last year that accessed Learning Blade, and that was up from 60,000 in 2016. And quite a few STEM lessons were completed, lots of STEM engagement by students, number of hours participating in the program, and nearly 700 teachers receiving STEM PD. And the really important note on this slide is this is in cooperation with our Tennessee STEM Innovation Network. Tennessee STEM Innovation Network was initiated as a beginning with Race to the Top. We have regional STEM providers throughout the state, and STEM supports all of our work across the state in our STEM schools and STEM hubs, which are generally university affiliates. So we're thankful for that working together. If you could go to the next slide, please. I wanted to share some of the Learning Blade impacts on learning, because this is great. We have kids accessing online learning through this really innovative tool about STEM, but what does that mean for us as a state? And in 2017, based on our student survey results, we're seeing some really great impact on students understanding STEM. About 71% learned about new careers based on this survey. 75% learned about technology careers. 79% said they liked math and they see it useful in solving interesting problems. 97% said they would go on to be an engineer or a scientist. And 56% are now saying that they plan to take advanced science and math when they get to high school. So this is great news for learning in Tennessee. And then to the last slide, this was some independent research by a teacher who initiated this program in her middle school, and did a comparative study between her school and another school. And Dr. Catherine Kendall, this was actually her dissertation research, showed that as outcomes of students who participated in this program, 59% said they were more likely to be interested in a STEM career. 84% said they would like to access a job that builds or designs. 240% more students said they know what STEM workers do. 70% more likely to talk about science with friends, and 11% more likely to talk career plans with friends. So this plays into where we're going in Tennessee. We know we have need for more students to go to college. We know we have need for more students to take advanced courses in high school. And we know that we have many jobs that can't be filled by Tennesseans until we solve this problem of student learning around STEM careers. So we're really thankful to partner with Learning Blade in this project in Tennessee. Thanks, Zach.
Dr. Earhart, I want to double back on a couple of fronts here with you. I happened to be at the University of Memphis last week with Dr. Rudd, the president of the University of Memphis, and that's one of our four-year institutions. There was some concern when Tennessee Promise was initiated that it might in some way harm the four-year schools. Well, this fall, they have a 6% increase in enrollment at the University of Memphis, 23,000 students. They're growing gangbusters, and frankly, Tennessee Promise only fuels that. The data points that you talked about the retention rates in the first 2 years, staying in college, more likely to finish that four-year degree. This is a success story. On the STEM front, the data point that I like the most from Battelle, who does the validation here, is that if you're on Learning Blade in the middle school, you're twice as likely to become a scientist or an engineer. So this is the connection point that we're talking about between the workforce and our systems of education, so that we actually fill the pipeline and have these computer science workers trained and educated for the jobs that are actually in the marketplace. We still have a disconnection in this country between education, where we get degrees there are no jobs for, as opposed to get certificates and degrees for the people that want to go into the jobs that we have available. And there are millions of STEM jobs available in this country. We want to encourage everyone on this webinar to tweet #CSS strategies. I saw a lot of Twitter and Instagram activity heading into this webinar. We would encourage you to tweet while you're on this webinar, #CSS strategies. Now, when we talk about these challenges, you have two sides, our educational system and then the workforce. So to have Balaji Ganapathy, the head of workforce effectiveness at Tata Consulting Service, tell us about community engagement, business engagement around developing that skilled workforce that we need today and tomorrow. Balaji, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Zach, and thanks to STEMConnector and Learning Blade for organizing this very important webinar. And thanks to all of you who have joined to listen in. Next slide, please. What I want to start off by talking to you about is that from a workforce and education perspective, it is important to address some of the realities of today. But in general, if you look at how society has changed and evolved, we live in a world which is very different from what it was 5 years or 10 years ago. The adoption of new technologies like artificial intelligence, 3D printing, deep learning, machine learning, Internet of Things, you hear these as buzzwords, but unlike previous innovation cycles in the past, where it took a considerable amount of time for these technologies to become mainstream, we are living in a time when all of this is here and now. So as these technologies are being introduced into the marketplace, they are being adopted at a very rapid pace. And therefore, the way in which we need to adapt to these as a society, as a country, as a business, as a government, and as the civic and the education system needs to be extremely agile and responsive, and cannot be in the manner in which we have approached other innovation cycles in the past. Next slide. So if you look at some of the statistics that to just add color to that, even today, the work that is being performed within organizations by 2020, a third of the skill sets that are required to perform that same work is going to change because of the advent and adoption of new technologies. And when you think about the future, 65% of children entering primary school today are going to be in jobs that don't exist. We don't have job descriptions for it. We don't know what the majority of those skills are going to look like. So it is being able to adapt to the changing needs of today, but also be resilient to the adoption of technologies that is going to be providing jobs tomorrow. So both of these are equally important. Next slide. So as you think about that, students need education that is much more hands-on, much more relevant, contextual, and reflects the need of the real world today. Which means that the education system needs to really catch up and get ahead if we have to really compete and prepare our young people for the jobs of today and tomorrow. STEMConnector and TCS and many other organizations have been doing a lot of work in the space of STEM 2.0, which is a combination of cognitive, non-cognitive, and technical skills. Among those, digital fluency, innovation excellence, and employability skills that we have identified and said that no matter which industry you are in, no matter which job that you are in, these are skills that are going to be critical and helpful for you to be employed and to be productive and to provide for yourself. Next slide. So from a company perspective, when we look at this, we look at it not just as the need to prepare for our own workforce for the need of today and tomorrow, which is one part of the problem or one part of the challenge. Reskilling of employees, upskilling of employees, providing them career paths, understanding future trends, all of that is important. But we have an obligation, not just as a company, but as an industry, to work along with government, civic sector, and education to prepare young people for 21st century careers of tomorrow also. Because we are on the lookout tower, we can see from an industry point of view where the change is coming and how it is going to be adopted. And therefore, it is our responsibility to create coalitions, to work alongside others in advancing policies, in advancing programs, in advancing specific initiatives that can address these. And in this, we should definitely place a lot of emphasis on equity and access. Because of the rapid changes that are happening, those who have access to be able to gain these skills are pretty limited today. Even with CS for all and all the efforts that are going on, we are able to reach a small portion of the population that has the potential to gain skills to perform these jobs. So the reason why CS for all and efforts across the country in states and at a national level are important is because young people, no matter what race, what gender, what background they come from, if they gain these skills, they can really close the gap of opportunity that exists today. They can be in jobs that can really provide for a family and provide for uplifting them from economic mobility, social mobility perspective. So that is the view that we have as an organization. That's the view which is a holistic one. So let's go to the next slide. And I touched upon a couple of trends that are fueling these changes, right, from industry perspective. There are demographic changes that are influencing it from a workforce perspective. Geopolitical forces like, which I don't want to get into, but are also influencing the kind of skills, the kind of work that is being done in specific parts of the world. So from an education trends perspective, on the call today, you have great leadership and examples from Arkansas and Tennessee who are leading the nation when it comes to adopting new policies, new programs, and providing the kind of infrastructure that is required to be able to move from where we are today to where we need to be. So from an industry perspective, upskilling is important. We focus on that. We focus on reskilling, lifelong learning, so that the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn, which is going to be the hallmark of being employable and having long careers. We are instilling that in our own employees and also in everybody that we interact with from an external community perspective. And then working along with the education system in order to shape and adapt to the changing needs that exist. So let me talk about a couple of examples of how we are doing this. Next slide, please. So within the organization globally, we have about 400,000 employees globally, and we already over the last 2-3 years, we have upskilled and reskilled our employees to be able to gain the digital skill set that are needed for jobs of today. So around 200,000 employees have already been trained, and what we call as a digital quotient. They exhibit competencies, they have the skills, they've gained certification, so that whether they are with TCS or go anywhere else and work for anybody, they will have skills that will be resilient and they can make themselves employable. Next slide. So the only point I want to mention there is that as employees, we have that obligation. So today, if small and medium businesses don't have the infrastructure or the bandwidth to come up with programs internally, they need to work together along with the larger organizations, along with workforce development boards, with state and federal agencies to set up those kind of pathways so that existing employees have opportunity to gain adjacent skills and move into jobs that are going to require those skills as opposed to being in the jobs that they are today and becoming those skills and those jobs when they become obsolete, they will not have a pathway forward. So it is critically important that we do that. But when I spoke about empowering women and minorities and providing equity and access, a cross-sector coalition effort is really important, which is where initiatives and national movements like Millennium and Mentors, which has mobilized over 1.8 million pledges from industry and from people in this country in support of girls and women advancing in STEM disciplines and STEM careers. Or take the example of US 2020, which has created high impact mentoring as a model that can be applied at a city, at a state, an organization or initiative level, and really changing and transforming the outlook of students and young people from minorities and underrepresented groups. Or Empower, that is providing technology skills and computing skills to veterans and disadvantaged youth and placing them in jobs with companies across all sectors so that you are hand-holding that population and giving them a way to move forward. Some of the other examples highlighted here, I can't go into each one today, but this is a portfolio of some of our biggest partners. Ruth mentioned earlier about Boy Scouts. We are working with the Boy Scouts to create some digital badges, which will we'll announce soon, but that will address some of the computer science needs that might exist in that space. So the lesson here is for organizations, when you're looking at community outreach, go to where the people are. So if your students, if your beneficiaries are in large and medium markets, if they are in inner city neighborhoods, if they are in rural America, you have to meet them where they are and work with the organizations, whether it is youth serving organizations, schools or education systems that are closest to those people, and prioritize equity and access, because when the funding comes, it is going to come first for affluent neighborhoods. So if as industry we prioritize those that may not have access, that may not get those kind of funding, the impact will be much higher. Next slide. So, which is what we have done. We have focused on computational thinking as a core part of what we create as offerings from industry perspective. And what that can do is, computational thinking is much more broader than learning computer science as a skill set. Computer science can get you into these jobs that are high paying, really exciting kind of opportunities. Computational thinking can prepare you for a world where you're interacting with robots, you're interacting with machines and with systems that work by a different set of rules than what we have experienced in the past. So critical thinking, problem solving, pattern abstraction, a variety of skills that you can gain can help you lead a better life. So, and it can also make our young people creators and innovators who can lead the next moonshot. They can find a cure to cancer. They can put a person on Mars or on Jupiter. They can completely transform the way some of the biggest challenges in the world are being looked at, and do that. Finally, next slide. So these are the elements that we put into a program called Kauai Tea, which we've been running from 2009. I'm just highlighting it as an example of how industry can work along with school systems, with nonprofits, to bring technology and computational thinking and computer science hands-on experiences to classrooms and students across the country. We started off small in Cincinnati, Ohio. Today, we are in 54 cities across the US and Canada. And using a train-the-trainer model and using our own employee resources, we are further going to deepen this engagement in these communities. And in many of these communities, this may be the first time they are experiencing a program where they are working with industry professionals, understanding a real-world situation, a problem, identifying that, and using design thinking, using human-centered design, and some of the computational thinking strategies and concepts to solve problems. That brings confidence, that brings a kind of expertise, experience that will last with them forever. Next slide. Final point I want to make is that industry needs to go one step further and work along with the education system in helping out with connecting the curriculum to the real world. So while hands-on exercises and experiences are great from after school and out of school perspective, what is also important is defining what kind of instructional material, what kind of resources, what kind of concepts do students need to talk about and learn in order to be able to solve the problems of tomorrow. And in order to do that, we have worked with Discovery Education, and coming this September, a new set of instructional resources, training material, and lesson plans are going to be introduced into classrooms across the country. This is in line with the existing state standards and national standards. It will be aligned with the computer science framework, K-12 computer science framework that was introduced last year or brought out last year. And it is going to offer at least 30 to 40 examples of lesson plans where you're integrating computer science with core subjects like math, science, humanities. So students get to experience computer science as an integrated part of their life. And then when they advance to high school, they can, or higher grades into middle school, they can choose the computer science specialized courses that are available. So this initiative is addressing a broader base. So we are training over 20,000 teachers over the next 5 years, and we'll be reaching more than 1 million students. And I'm really excited about it because it gives that real world connect. It gives a transdisciplinary way. Nobody is solving problems in silos today. Computational thinking, computer science can solve problems in every sector. And students need to have access to resources. Teachers and parents need to have access to resources that can reflect that. So these are some examples of work that we're doing. And finally, before I hand over back to Zack, I want to mention that we also work with Learning Blade. Along with Learning Blade, we partnered to create a computer science mission so that students can start to relate to the careers that they might be able to enter. So it's not just a stereotypical notion of somebody sitting behind a computer and coding something, right? That is one aspect of one job that exists in this space, right? So their missions are really great, and they are being implemented in states across the country and giving exposure to students about the variety and the diversity of careers that exist. Once again, thanks to all of you for your comments and your leadership. And for those who are listening, take this forward. If you're working for an organization, a company, champion this within your organization. And if you're not working in the industry, seek out a partner from the industry side and make them work with you. They are willing, but they need to be nudged if they are not already working in this space, because this is going to make us more competitive as a nation and as a society. Thank you.
Thank you, Balaji, and thank you, Tata Consulting Services. Just on that front, I would remind everyone, I do a lot of work in the energy sector, and every day, literally hundreds and thousands of items are connecting to the internet in what is commonly referred to as the Internet of Things. And the continued demand now for mobile computing is disruptive. It is growing light speed. You're going to be able to do virtually everything in your life with mobile computing. And that is where a high sector of growth in these jobs is going to come from. Let me go back and say, if you tweet, and we encourage you to, hashtag CS strategies. I threw an extra S in there a minute ago. Hashtag CS strategies. We encourage you to tweet. Our final speaker before we go to Q&A comes from the great state of Arkansas. To be honest with you, in my life, I always thought of Arkansas maybe for the Razorbacks, certainly for Walmart, maybe for President Clinton. But today I think of Arkansas for computer science and coding. This southern state leads the nation in coding and computer science. Governor Asa Hutchinson has blazed a trail that other states are following. He has an outstanding Commissioner of Education, Johnny Key. He is going to share an update with us of what's happening in Arkansas. But before he does, we want to congratulate him because he's not the most talented person in his family. His extraordinarily talented son is now in graduate school. He is a musician at a level few musicians ever achieve. So Johnny, congratulations to your son. Congratulations to you for what you're doing in the state of Arkansas. Another engineer and a friend of coding and computer science for the country, Johnny Key. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Congressman, and I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for the kudos to my son. I appreciate that. You know, Arkansas certainly is not the first place one might think of as being a leader in computer science education. But in Arkansas, our vision is to transform Arkansas to lead the nation in student-focused education. And nothing could be more relevant in this day and age than computer coding and computer science. So if you can go to the next slide. If you think about our journey, and that's really what it has been, I can say that it started in 2015 with Governor Hutchinson signing Act 187, but really it goes back several years before that. It goes back to when Governor Hutchinson was, at that time, a Undersecretary of the Department of Homeland Security. President Bush had asked him to join the administration in the days after 9/11 in a new role. And what the governor learned at that time was there are constant attacks on our country, constant attacks on our installations, constant attacks on our economy, coming through cyber, the means of the cyberspace. And it got him thinking. And when he became governor, as he was running for governor, he said, look, I want Arkansas to be at the forefront of not just from the security standpoint, but from the economic standpoint, the economic benefit of what computer coding and computer science can mean for Arkansas students. Act 187 of 2015 required all high schools to offer coding or computer science beginning in the 2015-16 school year. So think about how we had to ramp that up. It was a very quick ramp up from the session in 2015 to the school year beginning that fall. And what, in order to encourage that and not to add more to the students' plate or the school's plate, is the General Assembly decided, okay, we're going to make this be a math or a science credit, which was a very positive thing for our students and our schools. One of the hallmarks, one of the foundations for the success of Act 187, though, was the fact that we were able to put together a solid, fantastic group of private sector partners to become the Computer Science Task Force. We wanted, and the governor made it clear, he wanted us to listen to the voice of business and industry because they could see the future. They knew the direction things were going. And frankly, sometimes in education, we have not always responded as quickly to the needs of our business community as we probably should be. So we were able to put this task force together, and they gave us great direction, great guidance, and a great vision for the path of our computer science journey. One of the things that we observed as we began that journey is that we needed to create some infrastructure. So without that computer science infrastructure in our schools and our system, we would be really having a tough time climbing that hill. So what did we need to do? We needed to have support for schools. The governor put funding behind support for schools and support for educators. Not every school in the state of Arkansas, Arkansas being a rural state, had the hardware that was needed to embark on this type of journey. And we had very few teachers who were prepared to be in a classroom and teaching the computer science standards, to teach the computer science technology, all those things that were important to a successful delivery. So we spent a great deal of time working with providers and partners to create professional development opportunities. And I'm proud to say that when we started this journey, we had 12 active teachers in the state of Arkansas, through the whole state of Arkansas, that had any type of endorsement for teaching computer science. And now, through the work that we've done with a number of partners, we're up to 150, and it's growing every day. And we really believe that in the next couple of years, we're going to see that number increase substantially. The next slide, please. So for a long-term success of this program, as I mentioned, the collaboration with public and private sector partners, but it's also important that we establish a foundation that is in standards. It can't just, our work in computer science could not just be based on, each teacher being on their own. We had to have a set of standards that were clear, that set the standard for what we wanted students to learn. And we established that through grades 9 through 12 through a number of partners, but we also wanted to go deeper. One of the recommendations from our computer science task force was if this was going to have the long-term impact we wanted it to have on our state, we really needed to get this conversation into the lower grades. So we created standards for grades K through 8. Now, some might say, well, you know, what could you do with a kindergartner for computer science? And it's really basic. It's many of the things Balaji mentioned. It's collaborative working. It's problem solving, looking at a challenge and trying to think in a very structured way of how to attack that challenge and how to overcome that challenge. So many of those things that you see in our K-8 standards for computer science really are building blocks of what we want all of our students to know that are so relevant to the computer science world as well. When it comes to infrastructure, we also had a challenge within our public school computer network. We had an Arkansas Public School Computer Network. It has been in place for a number of years. But one of the challenges we had there was slow internet speeds in many of our locations. So over the last 2 years, we've embarked on a project working with the Arkansas Department of Information Systems, working with our providers out in the communities in the state, such as AT&T, CenturyLink, and others, where we have increased by 40 times our connectivity to all schools in the state of Arkansas. And the great thing about this is that we were able to do it with almost zero impact to the budget, using the budget we already had for this public school computer network, expanding the capacity of it, improving our service to our students and to our teachers, and doing that at very little budget impact. Next slide, please. Another thing that we had to do to create long-term success is students have to be able to see themselves in this work of computer science. If they cannot see themselves in that work, then it's very unlikely that they're going to opt to take those classes. One of the things that the governor has done is actually take coding tours, several schools a year around the state where he goes and he has assemblies where he is probably one of the biggest cheerleaders in the state, encouraging students to sign up for these computer classes and explaining to them why it is so important to their future. But initially, we also wanted to create a buzz. So we had a number of events around the state that were Hour of Code events, partnering with code.org to create opportunities for students at all grade levels to be able to see where they might fit. We also created an all-state coding competition. This is so students would have the opportunity, just like you have with all-state band or all-state choir, all-state football teams. We wanted to create an all-state coding competition, all-region coding competition, so these students would have an opportunity to show their stuff in the area of computer science. One of the most exciting partnerships we created is with TechStart. Facebook TechStart came in and invested over $1 million in the state of Arkansas to provide virtual equipment for every school in the state of Arkansas, throughout our classrooms, throughout our cooperatives, so that students would have access to the virtual reality world that has become more and more a part of this computer science journey that we're on. So we're really excited, and this is just a snapshot. I mean, there are so many partners that we have worked with over the last few years, and now that Arkansas is on the map, we have others who are contacting us. When you think about the Googles of the world, the Facebooks of the world, the Apples of the world, who come to Arkansas, the Microsofts, and they say, look, we hear what you're doing there and we're excited about it. We want to know more about how we can engage with your state in making this work. Next slide, please. The thing that is exciting now is that this is not just a vision that is coming from the governor, that is coming from the Department of Education. It's really a vision that is being seen by others, and now they're taking it and running with it. I'll give you an example. Just last week, I was in the West Memphis School District, and they have taken it upon themselves to create a new opportunity for their students. They call it the West Memphis High School Cyber Lab. They also nicknamed it Hacker High School. And the students this school year will have an opportunity to engage like never before in creating, hacking, learning hands-on applications of what real life scenarios could be like when they get into the work world, and building those skills that are so crucial to the success moving forward. And there are 2 other districts in the state of Arkansas that have embarked on this effort of creating a cyber lab. This is above and beyond what we have even expected. This goes beyond where we thought we might be at this time. And you know, part of the buzz that has been created of why our high school students are excited is because they are getting exposure as middle school students. Balaji mentioned the partnership with Learning Blade and how they've created the computer science mission and the Hack Attack mission. And we were proud to be a part of that effort, helping create that. We're so thankful for Learning Blade creating that for us and for the students, not just of Arkansas, but for all of our states. Again, so they can see that vision, where they fit, and the excitement that can come about with the opportunities in computer science. You go to the next slide, please. If you want to know more about our work in computer science, there's so much more than what I can cover in just this segment. But the link is there that can take you to the webpage on the AE website. Mr. Anthony Owen, who is our Director of Computer Science, is doing a great job of going around the state and around the nation, telling the story about computer science in Arkansas. And the final slide, please, to show you that the governor is still committed. It wasn't just a campaign promise. Governor Asa Hutchinson made that promise. He has fulfilled that promise, but he's also said we're going to go beyond just this being a campaign promise. This is something that is truly transformative to the state of Arkansas. It's transformative to our economy. When you think, as Congressman you mentioned, we're the home of Walmart. We're the home of a number of other Fortune 500 companies. And folks don't think of Arkansas as being a hub for economic development. This work that we are doing is going to really put us on the map even more as far as opportunities for our communities, opportunities for our students. The great thing is, in computer science, you no longer have to travel to Dallas. You no longer have to travel to Washington, D.C. or to New York City. Those are great places. But if a student wants to engage and be successful in computer science, they can do that right here in the state of Arkansas. And that's what we're excited about. We're excited about the partnerships we have. We're excited about the growth that we are going to see over the next few years.
Mr. Key, thank you very much for the presentation. We've had some questions come in online, and I want to wrap maybe 3 before we get to the top of the hour. One to Commissioner Key, one to Dr. Airhart, and another to Ms. Farmer. But Commissioner Key, while you have the floor, a question came in about this teacher training. Extraordinary, you've gone from 12 to 150. You talked about the success. The person that wrote in asked, do you incentivize teachers to go into computer science? How do you get them to do that? What are the tactics that you've used in Arkansas that others could learn from across the country?
Well, that's a great question. And yes, this year we're excited. This is something new for us, that we have initiated a stipend, a state stipend for teachers to pursue this certification. So we now have that in place where teachers can receive I think it's an extra $2,000. It may be more than that. I'm not sure. My friend Anthony Owen is probably going to correct me if I get that wrong. But yes, that's a very important part of creating it. And it's also something that we didn't want them to be out of pocket just to pursue the training. So we created opportunities for grants so teachers could do that, receive this development without having to dip in their own pocket.
Outstanding. Well, if it's not $2,000 now, it probably will be after you just said that. So hope that's not too much stress on your budget. Dr. Airhart, we know from history that standards, especially national standards, are very controversial, but states have standards. And how do you integrate best computer science into your standards in Tennessee?
Sure. We look at talking about computer science standards throughout different curricula, but particularly in math and science. So that's why it's so important to have students, especially in middle school, have this first experience of seeing how those things connect. How does Algebra 1 connect to a computer science skill? And certainly encouraging students through some of our work with our high school CTE programs in STEM and business perspective, and making sure that those processes are integrated across our math and science courses as well. And then we have many of our schools right now investing in coding as early as elementary school. So certainly appreciate that question.
All right, and then a question for you, Ruth. We know that Computer Science for All has a proven strategy for success, but we had someone write in and said, how can you replicate Computer Science for All across the states and at the local level? Can you give us ideas of how folks across the country might actually replicate what you've done to build enthusiasm and participation in the computer science arena?
Sure. Actually, it's been quite organic, but there's all these initiatives around the country that we call CS4X. So there's CS for Texas, there's all the great work happening in Arkansas, and the critical components of that are you need to bring together and sometimes they're pretty unlikely partners, which can yield incredible fun results. And you bring together your partners, and collectively, you can have a bigger impact than you can alone. So just in the last year, I've seen CS for Texas absolutely explode. They have groups all over the state working together, as well as a statewide group, and they collaborate on all kinds of things like talking to the legislature and letting teachers know how they can get trained, talking to districts. CS for Oregon actually funding from a state grant program that is launching their teacher PD in their state. CS for New Hampshire came out of a group of people both from the State Department of Education and the community organizations and the Computer Science Teachers Association coming together. So there's lots of stakeholders that have an interest in this, and I think the critical thing is to bring those stakeholders to the table and ask them to contribute their individual core competencies. So, if you've got a TV station that can give you advertising, great. And if you've got somebody who can work the policy angles and use their legislative influence, that's great. Bring in all those different partners and work on it together, just like we did with the space race. So think of it as a space race and get everybody on your team.
Great, thank you. So we are approaching the top of the hour. We said we would only keep you 1 hour. And the school year in many states is underway, and it will be soon in others. So kind of number one, we hope that you have a great school year if you're in education. We want to thank you for being in education, and we want to encourage you to do all you can, as we are, to fill this pipeline with coders and programmers, computer scientists, and STEM students that enter the workforce prepared to work these jobs and keep our country competitive. I want to thank the panelists and all of the organizations that they represent. I also want to thank STEMCONNECTOR for kind of being the glue that keeps us all together from day to day in the STEM world. I want to encourage any of you that didn't get a question through to use hashtag CS strategies and ask your questions by tweet, and we'll get them answered for you from this distinguished panel. The states that are represented are on the move. We want to, oh yeah, and there's video. So there's a video of this hour, and you can use that. So stay connected to us, obviously through STEMCONNECTOR and other sources, but thank you for your time. Thank you for what you're doing. This is really, really important for young people across our country because it's such more opportunity for them, and it makes our country much stronger in terms of this global economy in which we operate. You're in a great field at a great moment. We thank you for your efforts and your time today. Have a great day and a super fall in school.